It is 5:30, and I call this meeting to order. Maplewood City Council Managers Workshop. City Clerk Sind, take the roll call for us, please.
Councilmember Villavicencio.
Here.
Councilmember Cave.
Here.
Councilmember Juniman.
Here.
Acting Mayor Lee.
Present.
And Mayor Abrams is not with us tonight.
Thank you. All right, looking for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved. Second.
Motion's been made by Councilmember Cave, and seconded by Councilmember Villavicencio. Any further discussions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Abstention? Motion pass. Thank you, Council. Going to move right into unfinished business, and we're going to be talking about the highly anticipated ambulance fund presentation tonight. City Manager Sabo, kick it off for us tonight.
Thank you, Acting Mayor and Council members. This is one of the issues that has emerged as an area of concern for us, kind of long term, as one of the few municipalities that operates its own EMS ambulance service. We've seen from the statewide level changes in the system that are causing delays in response times, particularly in greater Minnesota. And so the legislature has convened a couple of working groups to talk about this issue. And we know that when people are in danger and they call 911, they are expecting an appropriate response. And so we're one of the few cities that has this service, and Chief Monder is going to talk more in depth about what this means. But I view this as sort of the first conversation, what I expect to be maybe 3 years worth of broader conversations, because there's federal implications, there's statewide implications, and there's certainly local implications. And so this, from the standpoint of discussion, is really a table setting to really kind of frame up what the potential issues are. And then what we're looking for from you is to sort of identify some potential next steps, and then advocacy efforts on behalf of the city of Maplewood. So I just want to frame that up for the council.
Awesome. Thank you so much, City Manager. We'll move on to Chief Mondor here for the next presentation then.
Thank you, Acting Mayor, members of the council. As City Manager Sable said, I'm going to provide an ambulance fund update and an overview of the state of EMS in Minnesota, locally, nationally, and regionally. Purpose of tonight's presentation is to go over the current state of EMS. We're going to provide an overview of services and reimbursement and how the ambulance fund gets revenue. We'll overview mutual aid impacts and their impacts in our community and neighboring communities, and then talk about the current state of the ambulance fund, optional strategies moving forward, and then next steps. EMS regulation in the state of Minnesota is unique. There's one other state in our country that has a similar service delivery model as far as how they regulate emergency medical services. In the early 1980s, Don Shelby from WCCO did an investigative report that highlighted several gaps in the way EMS was provided during that time. Following that report, the state of Minnesota established primary service areas, and communities were essentially assigned these primary service areas based on who already operated them and if they wanted to continue the service. So the governing body in the city of Maplewood at the time, in my opinion, was wise and chose to keep the city of Maplewood as our primary service area, whereas we have local control and local provision of emergency medical services in the community. So we've been through this several times over the past several years, but the city council can say, we want you to be there 8 minutes, 90% of the time, and you can control that and you can change that. Obviously, the investment level differs based on where you set that local expectation. That is not common across the state of Minnesota. So there's several different service providers. There's lack of control, frankly, locally, when you do not possess the primary service area. And I'll get a little bit further into that in upcoming slides. Maplewood EMS, since the mid-1970s, in a partnership with the police and fire departments, has provided EMS in the community. It started with a hybrid police fire response where the police paramedics who were out on patrol would respond to emergency medical services calls, and the fire department, who was paid on call or volunteer at the time, would bring the ambulances. They would meet there, transport to the hospital. As police call volumes increased and the overall demand of emergency medical services increased in the early 2000s, that model began to shift towards the fire department, and in 2005, the fire department was the primary provider of EMS in the city of Maplewood. Around that same time, in the early 2000s, the Ambulance Enterprise Fund was established. So there's a lot of history behind how we got to have an Ambulance Enterprise Fund. There's some formulas that we'll discuss tonight. And it was built 2 decades ago, and the changes in our community and the demands of our community have changed, and the accounting structure has presented challenges, as you've seen during recent updates to council. This slide's intended to kind of highlight the complexity of EMS service delivery in the metro region. So if you look at this map, this is a primary service area map taken from the Minnesota EMSRB, the Emergency Medical Services Regulatory Board's website. And so over time, these primary service areas were established. Most of them have been consistent since the establishment of the PSA law in the early 1980s. But as you can see, there's around 15 different names on this map. And you can go into St. Paul. They have a very similar service model that we have. You go to neighboring Roseville, Little Canada, it looks different. So whoever provided those services can continue to provide those services, and there's really not a lot of local control as to how those services are provided, what performance standards are established for those services, what the response times are, and there's very little statutory authority to make significant changes. So for instance, in Maplewood, if the city did not possess their primary service area and ABC Ambulance Service was providing that service, we'd have very little say in response times, in staffing levels, et cetera. So you as a city council do have that control. It's local control and local provision in our case. I'm going to walk through kind of the funding cycle of how EMS works in most of the nation, but this is more focused locally and with the state of Minnesota. So incident occurs, an illness or injury that requires someone to call 911. And you'll see here local control, meaning we have local input over our Ramsey County Emergency Communications Center. You all have control of what level of police and fire services that you want to provide. Our residents have certain expectations about what level of services that they would like to receive. So in this slide, you can see that that's the piece that most communities, if not all communities in the state of Minnesota, have control over. The challenges, and this is looking at a private EMS service delivery model, the local jurisdiction or the authority having jurisdiction has control over those things, but then they're not allowed to seek reimbursement for those services. So in the instance of a private EMS provider, most communities, especially metro communities, the communities said, and the councils have said, we want the police department to respond when it's appropriate, and we want the fire department to respond because we want someone to get there quickly. Then the ambulance comes, and there's a treatment that occurs. Sometimes scene treatments can be reimbursed, sometimes they can't, and I'll talk about that in a couple slides here. But the primary mechanism for reimbursement has to do with the transportation benefit. So moving Mr. and Mrs. Smith from point A, from their home, from the motor vehicle accident scene to the hospital. And that's where a bulk of the reimbursement comes in. In our model, we have local input and local control over the entire spectrum of care. So illness or injury occurs, 911 call happens. We work very closely, police and fire, to determine what call types we're going to send police to, because they don't need to be at every EMS call in the city of Maplewood. There are times where they do. If it's a cardiac arrest and they're closer, absolutely. If it's a traumatic injury and they can put a tourniquet on, absolutely. Items of scene safety and those things. And we work and review those things regularly. We also have control of the fire department, obviously. So sometimes you'll see a fire truck show up, but we have cross-trained firefighters and paramedics, so they can do any and all of the things that these other communities can do. And then in the city EMS response model, we have control of the treatment and the reimbursement piece because we have the primary service area and can transport patients, which is how we get reimbursed. So that's just a difference between how it's funded and how we have more control given the primary service area law in the state of Minnesota. I wanted to highlight the fee schedules because intuitively you would think if we can raise rates, we should see better reimbursement levels, and then we can address the ambulance fund shortfall, right? Well, we can raise rates. There's not any real regulation that says that we can't. And we do market analysis, and I'll be honest with you, our rates are usually on the higher end of our peers. But the way that the reimbursement model works with Medicare and Medicaid, there's certain designated pay types that you can bill $10,000. Medicare and Medicaid are only going to pay X. And I'll get into those more specific amounts. But I highlight this because our rates, we review them regularly. The answer isn't as simple as, well, let's raise the rates and we'll fix the reimbursement challenge. It's more complicated than that. And there's several different service levels that we provide, and I'll go into each kind of different scenario so you can kind of get a better picture as to what that looks like. What's an advanced life support 2? What's an advanced life support, basic life support, et cetera. The other thing that you'll notice that several years ago, there was a specific levy that helped fund the ambulance operation. And there was a decision made to have resident and non-resident fees. So the theory there being residents are paying some tax money to help subsidize the delivery of EMS service in our community. So that should be seen in the fees that we're establishing. There's several different reimbursement scenarios and response types that the fire and EMS department responds to each year, but we're going to just try to highlight these in the most common themes. So there's the response, non-transport, no fee, and no reimbursement. And I'll get into those a little bit further here. With some of these calls, I'll use the fall call, for example. That is our most common call that we go and we respond to, and we help Mrs. Smith up, a lift assist or a fall and a minor injury, and we don't bill for that service. And so it's one thing to continue to do the same thing and continue to respond. That's a cost to the system. There's a cost that's associated with readiness that we've built in this response system. We have invested in research in our community paramedicine program, in our falls prevention. We have a Remembering When program. We have a senior roadshow program. We have senior task forces that we go out in the community and try to look at what are ways that we can prevent these things from occurring. We have there's a couple of us within the fire department that joined with an orthopedic surgeon and researcher from Regions Hospital. We have published peer-reviewed research exploring the challenges of falls in a community. We're currently working with Ohio State University on another study to provide more support and follow-up resources through a grant-funded program to people that experience falls in their home. So we're not just sitting here saying, well, people are falling or people are having XYZ emergency, and that's just what it is. Where we can, we're investing in research, in proactive outreach, in follow-up and support care to try to help people live their best lives in our community. So in that spectrum of different reimbursement scenarios, we use the treatment non-transport. So we'll say someone has a diabetic emergency, their blood sugar gets low. Either they took too much insulin or they didn't eat. We go out, we establish an IV in them, and we give them a medication called dextrose. Gets their blood sugar up. They don't they don't necessarily need a hospital visit, right? They needed what we provided at their side, and they can be stable if they have someone to watch them, and we can get them something to eat. So that was the service they needed. Unfortunately, Medicare, and to a large extent Medicaid, some cases they will, but they don't view it as a treatment benefit. They view this service as a transportation benefit. So even though we did what was right for the customer, and there's a cost to the system to provide this level of service, our average charge for this is $708. You can see Medicare will not pay. They will not pay for that. And so essentially that's a cost of the system that's not going to be reimbursed. BLS transport, this is a simple call as a sick person. Maybe someone fell and they have a skin tear, but they're worried because they're on blood thinners. They require transport to the hospital, but we can do that with minimal interventions. Average charge for that service is $1,944. So for me, if the city, I have a great benefit, insurance will cover that cost outside of any out-of-pocket expenses. Our charge is $1,944. Medicare will reimburse an average of $452. Medicaid will reimburse an average of $436. So you can see, even if we raise the rates on these BLS transports, and I'll show you our payer mix in a few slides, and it will kind of resonate with how that's not the solution. An ALS 1 emergency, that one of our primary examples of that is a chest pain. So we're going to do some advanced diagnostics. We're going to do a 12-lead EKG. We're going to start an IV. We're going to give some non-invasive, pretty basic medications, but important medications. Average charge for that is $2,517. Medicare's average reimbursement's $537. Medicaid's $517. Then we get into the most significant call type as it relates to resources and interventions is what is called an ALS2. So you think of someone in cardiac arrest. So their heart is stopped, they're not breathing. That requires a lot of resources. It requires a lot of interventions. We're going to put a breathing tube in for them. We're going to defibrillate them in many cases. We're going to start what's called an intraosseous infusion, which is basically a needle into the bone to give them a rapid medication administrations. And they're going to receive several medication administrations and sometimes several advanced procedures. Similar significant trauma, significant motor vehicle accident or pedestrian struck, several procedures, those will rise to an ALS2. Average charge for that's $2,884. Medicare will reimburse $778 and Medicaid $749. So you can see the reimbursement scenarios that we're up against create significant challenges as the costs of personnel go up, as the costs of supplies and equipment go up, as the demands in the community continue to rise. In Maplewood, payer mixes are different for all different communities, but baby boomers, I don't have the exact statistic, but we continue to see more and more enter Medicare age each day, right? And we're going to continue to see that trend for the next several years. Medicare and Medicaid represents 58% of our payer mix. So the best payers are often HMO or the private insurance, that blue tab. That's only 23% of our payers. And then there's other breakdowns, other insurance, so work comp, motor vehicle insurance. Patient payments represents people that are uninsured or payments that may come due to out-of-pocket type of expenses. And then we also do utilize revenue recapture. So if you have not paid your bill, there's several rules that are in place but we can capture your tax return if you've decided not to pay your bill and they receive at least 5 notices before we would resort to revenue recapture. To provide a deeper understanding of just different funding and accounting practices and what our peers are doing, I'm going to hand it over to our finance director, Joe Rube, so that he can give some details on that.
Thank you, Acting Mayor and Council. With the work of Chief Mondor and that, we reached out to several cities. There are 8 different cities in the metro area that are in situations like ours. Of them, 2 others operate as enterprise funds. Both of them are looking to get out of the operating enterprise fund operations of it because it's not working. 2 of them operate as special revenue funds. However, one of them, when they use their special revenue fund, they use that to collect all the revenue and they disperse it back to the general fund or to a capital fund for their equipment. So they're not using it all encompassing for that fund and that. And then the other 4 all use theirs as within the general fund or have their ambulance services in the general fund. And partly just keeps it all together between fire and ambulance. It keeps it in the general fund, keeps it all together. It's one department, just 2 different services that they provide. So they are combining that. They didn't indicate any issues that they've had with combining into the general fund. The biggest thing is that we do have an outstanding AR balance, and that's usually $2.5 million of what we're waiting to collect. And generally on an annual basis, we try to write off some of that because we won't be collecting it. So that's probably the biggest downfall is having it in the general fund is that will show up there. Outside of that, they've all seen pretty positive responses on how they're operating their ambulance fund within the general fund or ambulance services in the general fund. So if it's fine, I can go in a little bit more detail of the finances and that. So with our cash balances dating back to 2021 is $1.7 million. And then each year it has been depleting since to 1.3 million and then just under $500,000 last year. And this year anticipate that will probably be in a deficit in that fund, mainly because of our expenses are increasing and the revenues tend to decrease based off of Chief's previous slides and that. So with the revenues decreasing, the expenses increasing, it just eats away at our cash. The other complexity of it is the capital. We need ambulance and property equipment in order to provide these life-saving measures. Ambulances, it wasn't long ago that they're in the mid $200,000 range. They're now into the low $300,000 range, and they're going to continue to increase from there. So that's a huge expense to that fund as well. And then with council's commitment to adding additional firefighter, paramedics, that over a 4-year period, over a 5-year period, because we started doing it back in 2023, 3 that year, and then 24, 25, 26, and 27, additional 3 per year. So 15 total. That equates to $2.6 million in salaries and benefits. That doesn't include all the extra equipment that they need as well. So that just goes above and beyond that. Of that, 60% of it is charged back to the ambulance fund, which is $1.5 million. So the expenses are going to continue to grow, so it is going to continue to deplete the cash that we have had or will have in the future. Part of the looking to 2025, back in 23, looking at 24, we started doing a tax levy for the ambulance fund, and we're doing that as well for 2025. We'll have to continue doing that, but as we operate as an enterprise fund, it really should be pulling in the revenue necessary to cover the expenditures. So that's why a lot of other cities use it as a special revenue fund or part of the general fund, because it is being offset with levy dollars. Excuse me. And then, yes, I just want to mention again, the fact that the revenues will continue to decline, especially if we have an older population with the reimbursements being restricted.
Thank you, Joe. In our revenues historically, over the past several years, hover around $3 million per year. And so we've had conversations in my 13 years here of, the ambulance fund is losing money and the fire department's losing money. they're generating $3 million in revenue total, but the costs are, they continue to escalate. So we've talked about where did the 60-40 split come from? And Joe and I don't know, but we guess that at the time it was established, that's probably what paid the bills, right? You start to transition to a full-time fire department. About they do the formula. This is how much revenue we generate. That equates to 60%. While as we've evolved to all full-time fire department, and we've established baseline readiness levels and established response time metrics, the costs, and there's not the same balance there. The other part, when I think back to the slides of what we're in control of and what we're not in control of, is we don't own a hospital system, right? Like the state of Minnesota's EMS system is strained, if not broken, right now, and we can control what we can control in here. Some entity, all private, most at least private and public EMS providers will say that the funding is a challenge. We don't have the benefit of the vertical integration that a private hospital-based system has, right? So this provider goes and provides service in the community that brings them to the hospital that is the oversight entity of that ambulance provider. There's vertical integration and cost efficiencies there that as a municipality we don't have. And so I'm not going to get too deep into the accounting principles and differences between private and the government approach, but I think where the people that are most affected can make the decisions, such as our city council, is the best model to deliver these services in the community.
Thank you, Acting Mayor and Council members. Well, I think one of the clear examples, and I'll say it in a slightly more direct way than the chief because he has to work with these folks. But if you are an HCMC ambulance and you go to a call, you're going to bring that patient to HCMC where you have a different revenue model and a different revenue stream. So often, and I think when it was originally created, ambulances were seen as things that were revenue producing because you could bring them to your hospital and have them and then get all of your reimbursements and charges there. So they actually have the opportunity to get maybe the same reimbursement, which is lower, but increased medical bills and costs and payments that way. So you get a steady stream of patients just by operating an ambulance service. And so there's I think originally there was a perverse incentive created. And I think in the old days, ambulances used to race to accidents so they could pick up the patients and take them to their hospital, which was what the basis of the PSAs were originally, is to prevent people from chasing after accidents. And we don't have that problem because I think we do it in a public service mindset. But that is one of the things that when you talk, vertical integration is hard to explain, but it's just they might make money on the back end differently than we would.
Thank you, City Manager. Councilmember Juniman?
So what about the entities, the cities that have a hospital-based ambulance service that they contract with? Are they better off? Or are they part of this? Are they all, like Alina or Lakeview?
In conversations at the state level and with providers is that we're all experiencing shortfalls when it comes to EMS funding and reimbursement. As there's other opportunities, as the city manager Sable had discussed, but holistically funding in EMS in the metro, in the state, nationally, causes problems for EMS service delivery.
I just wanted to make sure that was true. Thank you.
We're all, Councilmember Juniman, we're all similarly feeling the pinch of these increasing costs. And when you have a majority of your payers that are on these, the Medicare, Medicaid programs, there's not much creativity that can occur that's going to shore that up.
Well, speaking of things that are broken, we could talk about Medicare, but let's not.
Councilmember Villavicencio?
Thank you. I just want to make a comment about the fact that I really appreciate what the department does and can say that, I've benefited from the great service that you all do. And I always remind my family that when you go by my house, even if it's 2 in the morning and the lights are on, that you're on your way to helping somebody in Maplewood. And that really means a lot to me. And I get very frustrated in these conversations because when I started my advocacy in Minnesota about 15 years ago, there was a lot of talk about in the area of long-term care and the baby boomers entering into needing long-term care. This exact issue was discussed. This exact problem. Everybody was trying to ring alarms, and nothing ever was solved. So I feel like I feel like I always have deja vu in these conversations because we've struggled and suffered, the senior and disability community, because of this. And it really is, it needs to be looked at as a prevention, like what your department is doing actually is preventing people from having to be more institutionalized by keeping them in their home, and which saves us a lot of money in the big run. And so we need to figure out how to say that to the people who can help us fund this. So I just wanted to say that, but thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Juniman?
Thank you. Well, I asked that question, but I already knew the answer. And one of the things that inspired me to ask that question is for other people's edification is that when I was first on the council a long time ago, we got the funny notion that we should maybe have the chief at that time look into someone else providing our ambulance service. Bad idea. When the RFP came back, it was like if you wanted a 20-minute heart attack and you only wanted one ambulance in your city, it would work really great. Other than that, not so much. I mean, the only ones that I even respected for responding were the ones that said, I'm sorry, we have enough to do. We cannot take you on. But the ones, there were 2 that responded, and I won't go there. But one of them could promise us 1 ambulance. Really. I guess we could draw numbers and see who's going to get the first call when, I mean, really. So that proves that it's industry-wide and we need to deal with it finally. I agree with Nikki, we need to deal with it.
Thank you for pointing that out, Councilmember Juniman. And even in my career here, in 2016, we did a deep analysis of the fire EMS service delivery through the fire EMS service work group, and continue to highlight that this is the best model for our community. It's not the model for every community, but I do believe, and the data would suggest that this is. The other piece that is hard to measure, but we in the fire department, we talk about the Maplewood difference, right? So I have countless stories, and we've shared some of them in the FYI, of people reaching out with positive feedback from our staff taking the extra step to do the right thing for the patient. And how I highlight that is, and I have this talk with all of our new providers, what I expect out of our employees is that they're caring for everyone they encounter as they would want their most loved one to be cared for. And I can say with the utmost confidence that if my sons or my wife, whoever your most cherished person are, I'd send them all, and I promise you we'd have that same level of care and experience, and that's not common across the United States. And so that is the part of the Maplewood difference that we continue to talk about. And if you go ask our providers and you say, hey, what are we really good at? They're going to, one of the first things out of their mouths is, we're great at EMS. I mean, we're great at a lot of things, but they're passionate about this and passionate about caring for our community members.
I still hold firm on my comment to a lot of community members that if everyone can do it the way Maplewood does it, I think they can do it right. So they have to model after us. So, Councilmember Juniman?
Yes, I can follow that up with, in 2 different occasions of mutual aid where we went to the aid of another city, and that was true. I got a phone call and I was out to coffee with somebody else who's made a point of telling me how fabulous the Maplewood people were to respond to their EMS call.
Thank you. So we're going to kind of do a little transition here and talk about some of the response challenges. But the other question that I just want to make sure I address is, so why would we accept Medicare and Medicaid if the reimbursement's so lousy? In the early 2000s, we had to accept what's called assignment from Medicare, and that was essentially you can accept this or you can't bill. And so, I mean, that's the framework that we're operating within today. We will continue to advocate, and I'll talk about some of the state and national advocacy later, but continue to advocate for reform. But that's going to be a slower process than what we can do at a local level. When we talk about response challenges, Mr. Rube talked about the increase in staffing, the increased costs in our capital equipment, and even our day-to-day equipment continues to rise. Some of the challenges that we're also experiencing are increasing call volumes and the impacts of mutual aid. So staffing over the past several years has been extremely difficult for all public safety entities. I feel like we're seeing a little bit of glimpse of hope within the city of Maplewood on the fire and EMS side, but that has impacted our community and communities around us. We have seen significant growth in mutual aid given or requests for us to go into other communities over the past, since 2022 is really where we started to see significant increases. 2023 was dramatic increase in mutual aid given. This is to one other service provider to align on their different communities that are near us. We've had several meetings with their leadership, and the city council wants to be a good partner. We need help at times, and we want to be able to provide help to our neighboring communities, but the rate at which the mutual aid was growing was not sustainable, and it wasn't mutual. And so they have, as you can see in 2024, we're seeing progress in the right direction. There's still work to be done there, however. Our overall mutual aid, you can see in 2023, again, it was at its height. But in 2022, we saw a steep uptick driven primarily by one or two providers that needed our help more often than they had historically. We continue to meet and try to figure out how we can balance this out, knowing that the city council and our residents have made a significant investment in the services that we deliver here. And so they do expect that level of service. And if we're always in another community, that makes it more difficult for us to be able to provide that level of service. So we do advocate for that, and are trying our best to make sure that the mutual aid utilization is indeed mutual.
Quick question, Chief.
Sure.
Looking at these numbers, I mean, we're trending up from 2021, 22, 23, and in 24, we're dropping in numbers. Are we just telling other communities no now, or are they just not calling us because they understand what the expectation is kind of going forward?
Thank you, Acting Mayor Lee. No, we have never said no, we will not come. Okay. That is a policy decision that we would have to have a lot of conversations with at the city council. We have put pressure to say, you need to figure out how to address this challenge in your community, just like we're investing in addressing the challenge in our community. Mm-hmm. So in instances of low acuity type calls, so a call where time is not necessarily emergent, like don't think about other solutions within the system that you have to be able to solve that before you're calling us. Think of options to be able to solve that before you're now asking for a second one of our ambulances. And so we continue to work together in calls that are time of life incidents, cardiac arrest, drownings, respiratory arrest. We have closest unit dispatching. We'll send our if we have the resource available all day long, we will send it, and our community benefits from that in a mutual process within the governmental entities in Ramsey County. And so we as a leadership team have advocated for common sense approaches to move this back in the right direction. We have never said, no, don't call us. That has not been our stance. But we also have people that we have to answer to about what we're doing with our resources. And so we have advocated for figuring out solutions within the communities you serve, investing, finding out different strategies for recruitment, capital. Getting ambulances is cited as a challenge, just getting the physical ambulance due to lead times. And we're finally seeing some movement in the right direction.
Thank you.
This will be and has been an item that we regularly analyze and will continue to analyze for the foreseeable future in hopes that we come into a better balance of the received versus given. And you can see in 2024, our received rate has gone up. It's still not in balance with what is given, but the overall call volumes within the city of Maplewood are going up slightly, and the mutual aid given is going down, which then again, it just suggests that the demand in our community is continuing to edge up, whereas in 2022 and 23, that call volume rise was largely attributed to the dramatic increase in mutual aid utilization of our resources. Any questions about mutual aid? Okay. Future recommendations and next steps. The City Council has made significant investments, and our community have made significant investments in the delivery of fire and EMS services. A lot of that's based on demand, that travel time response standard, and establishing baseline readiness levels. So in 2025, we'll have an engine at the north and the south fire station that establishes baseline service level that the community is going to get regardless of the geography where they live in the community. And in our opinion, my opinion, you've invested in it as if it is an essential public service. And for it to remain an essential public service, we're going to have discussions, as City Manager Sable said, over the next 2 to 3 years about how we account for it appropriately as an essential public service. We've talked about some of the fee structure and fee structure changes. There's some other methods to try to collect a little bit more. Hard collections, which isn't very popular, that would move the needle very slightly, around $100,000 a year. And we, from a policy standpoint, have not done that. But we are looking at every option for how we can best make sure that we're recouping those reimbursement rates. We certainly have discussed service level changes. As the costs go up, we have to account for it appropriately, or it could impact the service level that we're providing in the community. Mr. Rube provided an overview of the different accounting changes and options that we'll discuss more in detail in future meetings over the next couple of years. The other thing we've looked at periodically throughout my time here in the city of Maplewood is you can bill for additional call types. So in the fall example, we could bill for that service. Medicare is not going to pay, and then you can't say, hey, Medicare patient, we're going to charge you directly. You can't go after, quote unquote, the patient for that fee. Well, when you have 2 Maplewood residents and one gets billed because they have insurance and one doesn't because they have Medicare, it just becomes an equity imbalance conversation that we've said we're not going to do that. But there are other options that we've discussed and continue to look at. Overall, we kind of hit on this slide unintentionally through some of your questions and in our conversation, but the funding system for EMS in the United States is a challenge. There is some shifting of regulation in the state of Minnesota. Historically, EMS was governed by the Minnesota Emergency Medical Services Regulatory Board. Effective 2025, it'll be overseen by an Office of EMS that will have a director. That's a gubernatorial, easy for me to say. The governor will appoint a director to oversee the Office of EMS. The Minnesota Ambulance Association and Minnesota State Chiefs Association are jointly overseeing a task force that is looking at state advocacy for funding, accountability and transparency, education, workforce development, and EMS innovation, as Councilmember Villavicencio mentioned. It's not, the reaction isn't innovative, right? Preventing injury or illness is not particularly innovative. The fire department's done a great job, the fire service in the United States, of operating in that space. The innovative part comes in how's it going to be funded? How can I measure the fact that I stopped someone from falling, and how are we going to create some sort of mechanism to fund those types of activities? That I don't have an answer to. People much smarter than I do not have an answer to at this point. But when we talk about the landscape and the shifting of regulation, that's part of the conversation. When I talked about that, the Office of EMS, the Minnesota Office of Legislative Auditor, OLA, released a report in 2022 that highlighted several opportunities for the EMS system to evaluate. And the MEDS Task Force, Minnesota EMS Delivery and Sustainability Task Force, which is co-chaired by state chiefs and the MAA, is working on trying to come up with some more concrete solutions that we can all agree on, because there's a lot of different competing interests throughout the state of Minnesota as well. So trying to come up with some common ground to be able to address those issues and have a more sustainable delivery of EMS system in the future. We as staff are involved at the state level in several different capacities, advocating, sometimes testifying on behalf of common sense approaches to address the gaps in the EMS system. Also at a national level, appreciate council's support and the city manager's support to be engaged, to be in DC, meeting with Minnesota's delegation to talk about the issues that are impacting our community. So I'm not just talking about this as like a third party. We're at the table, and we're supported to speak up about the issues that are impacting Maplewood, which I'm proud to work for an organization that takes those steps. Some of our solutions that we've discussed, we need to take a harder look at resolving the ambulance fund balance. Mr. Rube highlighted that fund balance continues to decline, and we need to figure out more structural accounting mechanisms that are going to more accurately account for this essential service. We always look at partnership opportunities and how we can be more efficient with our neighbors. We'll continue to do that. Engaging stakeholders, conversations such as these are helpful. We'll continue to advocate at the elected and staff level. We'll make sure that we're in the right space in the market as it relates to fee schedules, and continue to push for state and federal change. That pace probably isn't going to come in a way that is at the pace we desire, but that doesn't mean we're not going to keep pushing. With that, I would open it up to any questions.
Thank you, Chief Mondor. Questions from the council? Councilmember Cave?
Hi, thank you. I just have a comment. I thought this was a great kickoff to the ambulance fund. You guys covered, a lot of stuff. I know there'll be questions because I mean, you don't have answers to right now, but for the people of Maplewood to know that this is something that they desire also. Our citizens want this. I want this. I didn't know. I mean, I really am glad that I don't live in another county right now, much less another town. I mean, when you hear about this, you take it for granted, just like we do our water. And this is something that Maplewood has strived to give the people of Maplewood, and we continue to. And I think this is just being very transparent, too, so people can see that the cost, I mean, what it's costing us. Not that we're not going to do it, but we just have to have solutions in the future. And everything, like you said, isn't raise the rates. It solves everything. So we just have to be creative. And I appreciate also, Mike, you be able to go to the national convention, because that's really, you get more involvement and you see you can say what we need and you can express that. And I think that's a big part of it. And it keeps Maplewood so strong, having all these tentacles out there and feelers to see what, options we have. So thank you.
Just quick comment. Thank you, Councilmember Cave, for that piece of it. This is definitely not something easy that we're going to fix overnight, and these continued conversations are very critical and important. Listening to this and kind of thinking through this process over the last few months here, there's a couple priorities that I have for this, and for me, I see this as a public service, but I would hate for it to come at the cost of our residents, and they're the taxpayers in our community. They live here, they work here, and they play here. They should have the best benefits. And, I think about that because we do provide, in my opinion, like I said, Councilmember Juniman, we talked about this earlier, we provide great services. I want other communities to benefit from our community too. But we have to think about Maplewood first, and long term, we want to make sure this is a sustainable process. So, I think thinking through this process, kind of ongoing, I would love to see if the city manager and the team can put together kind of a timeline so we can kind of see something visual so we understand what we're planning for. What does that look like 3 years from now, 5, 6 years from now? What does that look like? When can we potentially solve this problem if it ever happens? So that way, not just for the council, but for our community, so they're engaged through this process. And I think engaging stakeholders, you mentioned that above there, Chief Mondor, as you continue to do the work in our community, maybe that's something that we need to talk with our community about. If we were to continue to keep this as a public service, what are your interests in continuing to fund this? Just so we have an idea what our community's priorities are. So those are some of the key pieces is Maplewood before anyone else. Any other questions or comments from council? Awesome. Thank you, Chief Mondor. Appreciate it very much, and continue to do the great work that you guys do. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on to our next item on the agenda, and that is the budget presentation from Community Development Director Danette Barr.
Thank you, Acting Mayor, members of the council. It's my pleasure to be before you this evening talking about our budget. It's not the first time you've seen it, but I'm glad that we get to drill down a little bit on it. I'm going to kind of move quickly because we have an EDA meeting to get to, but luckily this is not new information for you. Finance Director Rube has done a good job laying this out previously. So I just want to kind of high level, 7.13% of our general fund budget is community development. I think when we talk about what that breakdown, what that looks like, $6.81 per month, which I know we all like to talk about for the different departments, is what we have an average household pay towards the quality that they get from community development. We'll talk a little bit more about what all those services are. But some of the key initiatives we've worked on and been building on over the years, and particularly this last year, is targeted redevelopment efforts. We see that coming to fruition in the Gladstone area. We see it in other pockets throughout the city. It's becoming very obvious when you see what's going on around the city right now. Business expansion and retention. We don't talk a lot about this, but we're going out on a regular basis and meeting with our businesses. We are in partnership with the St. Paul Area Chamber. They have a representative that comes to town. Often I go out with them. Sometimes the mayor attends those as well, and we go out on a regular basis and talk to our businesses. Part of it is to understand what their needs are. It's to show appreciation and understand what we can be doing to help them grow and to prosper here locally, as well as businesses that might be coming to town. We expect early next year we'll see the St. Paul Area Chamber come before you and share some of the feedback we've heard and kind of talk more about next steps going forward and how we can grow that initiative with the chamber. We also obviously work on continuing that our housing stock is healthy and safe. That's not just new housing that is actually being built or is coming up in the future. It is our rental housing, obviously. We're looking at that closely, as well as looking at remodeling. The age of our community, we've got a lot of remodeling going on, and it's really important that we be working with people to make sure they're getting what they need for permits. It's done in a timely fashion and done in the right way so that it's a long-term investment that they can rely upon. Supporting food safety events. This is kind of a unique thing we do here in town. We do it in conjunction with our friends in fire. We offer opportunities when it comes to events, particularly where food trucks are involved. Multiple times a year, they can come in, and we've expanded that again this year to allow them to come in to get licensed prior to events to make a much easier transition for them when they want to utilize those events for commerce. And then code compliance. Obviously, the age of our community, we are in a point where it's really important that we're out doing code compliance, and we do that every day. We do it well, and it's consistent. And I know you can all speak to that because we hear from all of you, so thank you for that. I won't spend a lot of time on it, but you will notice that our organization table has changed a little bit. We have one additional square, which is on the building official side. Right below that, the deputy building official. Thanks to the council and our city manager, we are in the process of hiring a new deputy, a newly created position, and we're anticipating that in the next week we'll be able to announce our new individual that we're excited to be taking that role on. As far as our overall budget, I'll just draw attention to two areas where we've actually, this isn't very different from what you've seen in some of the other departments as well, which is obviously when it comes to staffing, that is a dollar amount. Part of that had to do with our wage study, and then we had that new position that was created, as well as those internal charges. Those are ones that we all take on collectively to do our business, and those costs are all rising. So. The one thing that's really unique about our department, and I hate to brag about this because I often do, but we actually make money to some extent. I'm not saying that correctly, but we actually cover our costs, and we are able to contribute to the success of our community. This is not, what you see on the overhead is not inclusive of planning. It's just some of the building department permit fees that I wanted to just pull out. And this only goes to the end of October, just to give you an idea what we're seeing this year. So that's something that we take a lot of pride in, that we're able to do it in a way that is very economical for our consumers coming in and providing all the services I talked about earlier. When we talk about upcoming projects, here's a handful of them, or a little more than a handful, for you to look at. You're familiar with all those. We've talked about many of them. Some of these are ongoing ones that we're going to see over a number of years. St. Paul Regional Water, that's a 5-year process, and we've seen a lot happen there. We don't talk a lot about it. I know Councilmember Cave's very well aware from working with that group, but we are going to continue to see that ramp up over the next couple of years and then wrap up. We also will see St. John's Hospital. That expansion has only very beginning stages are we seeing that. So there's a lot coming up in regards to that. One of the reasons I wanted to draw attention to this is the fact that this is going to require additional staffing. So one of the things that we've been very thoughtful about is we don't want to overstaff and then have to cut back later. That's not an environment we want anyone to be in. But we have to also meet the needs of our community. And so it's something that we'll have to be very aware of going forward. As we look forward, we have to talk about inspections, plan review staff. We've been creative in regards to using outside resources to some extent. We brought people on temporarily. We have some contracts for outside inspection and plan review services, so we can call on those and in the points where we really need them the most. Our planning staff, that's kind of an ebb and flow as well, and we have some consultants we can look to when we need those, but there may be times we have to revisit that from another standpoint, and there's costs associated with that, obviously. Our state delegation agreement, we do that with Oakdale. We may have to call on them, and they may call on us. We're hoping our deputy building official will be able to help augment that in the next year. And then code enforcement, obviously, that's only rising, the demands for that. So we want to be aware of the staffing. We want to, things we also want to look forward to are the economic development priority planning that's going to continue to unfold. You've seen multiple steps of that thus far, and we're going to continue that forward for the rest of the year into next year, as well as our economic development resources and looking at where do we want to put our priorities, where do we want to create those opportunities with resources, either through a separate levy, specifically the EDA, or other type of ways we want to build up our ability to be proactive when opportunities arise. And then the the housing. How do we want to spend resources that are going to come our way, and how do we want to maximize those in the future, as well as the comp plan we're going to be looking to start in just a couple of years. Feels like we just did it, and we're going to be doing it again, and those are very costly. We don't put money aside. Every year we've been lucky, we've gotten grants in the past for a big portion of them, so in the next year, there'll be a conversation about how do we want to fund that. Wow, I think that was record-breaking. 6:29, woohoo for me. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Questions from council? Okay. Just a quick comment to you, Danette, Ms. Parr, you are truly amazing. I think when we think about community development, we have to have a strong community development department to continue to adapt to the changing dynamics of our community. So you guys are have a lot of high touch points with our constituents. So thank you for that work. And I look at this list of developments going on and coming to our city, and it's a lot of props to the community development department and the council now and previous years. And it's a lot of work that you guys have all put into this to make this all happen. Maplewood is truly amazing, so thank you for that.
Thank you. I'll pass that along to the staff.
Councilmember Villavicencio?
I just want to also say that I appreciate everything you're doing and what the department does. But I want to say that, or I guess my question is, how was it paid when the comprehensive plan happened before in Maplewood? How was it paid for then?
The last time we did the comp plan update, we were able to get some resources through the Met Council and the state, and it's not uncommon that resources are utilized for grant purposes. We also had some money that was put aside, not specifically for the comp plan, but a fund basically that we could pull from in order to, and I think we actually took a little bit from the EDA. It was kind of a combination of a number of resources, and I can look to Finance Director Durwood if he wants to add anything to that, but I think it was augmented by a number of sources.
That is correct.
Well, thank you. I just wanted to know, thinking in ahead of time. Thank you.
Yep, City Manager Sabo.
I just thank you, acting mayor and council members. I just want to thank community development. We're so formal here. Community Development Director Parr. Danette has done a really remarkable job, and I think this budget process. And she came early on, and she could identify that all of these building projects that were coming down the line really required a change in advance of it, and she identified it right away, advocated for it. So she really has put the entire department on solid ground, and I just am so grateful for your work on that, and we're going to miss you.
Before I close the meeting, I just want to say that the next city is very lucky to have you, and we hope that they're going to take good care of you. So, all right. With no further item on the agenda, the Maplewood City Council Manager Workshop is adjourned.
Yep, we're going.
Okay. Okay. I'd like to call to order the Maplewood Economic Development Authority special meeting, Tuesday, November 12th, 2024. City Clerkson, will you do roll call, please?
Commissioner Villavicencio,
Here.
Commissioner Lee,
Present.
Commissioner Juniman,
Here.
Vice President Cave,
Here.
and President Abrams is not with us tonight.
Thank you. We have an agenda in front of us. Do we have an approval of the agenda?
So move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any of those opposed? Okay. We have approval of minutes, the September 9th, 2024 Economic Development Authority meeting minutes.
I move approval.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any further questions? Okay, with that, all in favor, signal aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and we have the October 15th, 2024 Economic Development Authority bus tour meeting minutes. Do we
So
have-
move.
We have a motion and a second. Any further questions? With that, all those in favor, please signal aye.
Aye.
Aye. And any of,
Abstain.
Kathy abstained. Do you have that, Kathy abstained? Okay, any of those opposed? Okay, with that passes with one abstention. We have no public hearings tonight, no unfinished business. We move to G1, new business. And with that, we have Danette Parr, our Assistant Executive Director.
Thank you, Acting President and Commissioners. This item is not new to you. You have talked about this one a number of times, so I am going to turn it right over to Shane Rudling with Ellers, and he's going to walk us through Tax Increment Financing District 1-18. This is the site just south of Juniper, Frost and English, and with that, I'll take it away, Shane.
Thank you, Acting President. Shane Rudling, for special this project. All right, does that sound better? Much better. All right. All right, Shane Medling with Ellers. I'm here to talk about the JB Bank project and TIF District 1-18. So the TIF District 18 would be placed on an existing mobile home park, and today we will go through a project overview, talk about past action, talk a little bit about performance analysis, talk a little bit about logistics in the TIF plan, and then talk about the recommendations both for the EDA and the City Council later. We'll do this presentation once, and you won't hear it again during the City Council, but I'd be here to answer questions during the council portion if there are any. So 19 manufactured homes would be replaced by 56 apartment units. Back in June of 2023, the EDA supported a resolution of TIF as the developer was applying for various funding sources. On September 9th of this year, the EDA reviewed but didn't act on a level of TIF assistance. It was $309,000 and change. We've since rounded that off to $310,000, giving them an extra $100 just to make the spreadsheets look nicer, frankly, inconsequential rounding. So the project qualifies as a housing TIF district. It has income restrictions at 30, 50, and 60% of AMI. No market rate units. It does have a number of units that are people with disabilities, that's PWD, and HPH for high priority homeless folks in at the 30% level. This is the budget. It's very similar to the one that you saw back in September. It's a couple $100,000 less than what you saw as the developer fine-tuned the costs and received funding sources to close the gaps that remained back in September. $310,000 in TIF that would be applied to the project. There's tax credit funding in the deal. In the red ovals, $344,000 construction costs. That's per unit. It's quite high. There are a number of 3 and 4 bedroom units in this project, so it drives that cost up, but still an all-in cost of $502,000, almost $503,000 per unit. It's a big number, but we're used to seeing those numbers for projects like these, so it's not unusual. On the perform analysis, what we do with that is take all the numbers, and there's been a number of iterations on this project, going back quite a few years, actually. We make sure that the developer is maximizing their first mortgage proceeds based on the rent that they can get, that they're using the tax credits in the most efficient way, that they're deferring their development fee and only getting an appropriate fee. We take a look at the cost, and we take a look at how much management fees are being generated by the project. And so based on current market conditions, we were able to say that it wouldn't occur without TIF. We're recommending that it would be applied through a pay-as-you-go note, so very little risk to the city or the EDA with this method of financing. The payments would only come from captured tax increment and not from any other funding source, and it wouldn't happen except for the project happening. If the TIF note's not repaid, then the EDA doesn't have to pony up any additional funds. So again, we recommend $310,000. That's a principal or a present value number, so the gross number is actually a bit higher than that, and it would be paid out over a period of up to 20 years. That's the performance stuff. Now we switch over to the TIF plan. So the performance stuff relates to the development agreement and the recommendation for the $310,000 in present value or principal for the project. Separately, but related, is the TIF plan that the EDA and council would consider tonight as well, that goes through the documents that formally set up and put the county paperwork and all that in place so that the EDA and the city can receive the TIF and then pledge it to the developer through the development agreement. So that document you've seen before on various other TIF districts here, and this one is very similar to others. Again, it's a housing district. I think the last one that we did here was a redevelopment district, just a little bit different flavor of the type of TIF district. And it provides funding for the EDA and the city for administrative costs to the tune of 10%. And then again, the district runs for 26 years. The obligation here is only 20. So there would be some money left over at the end that, based on the rules of TIF, you could decide how you wanted to spend that money, or you could shut the district down early as well. But you don't have to make that decision today. The TIF plan includes inflation and relatively low interest rates to make sure that there's enough budget room for you all to have the most flexibility later. And so the TIF plan has some numbers in it that are different than the development agreement has, and that's intentional to give you that flexibility later so that you can make those budget decisions. Again, the TIF plan, you'll see it does have an estimated market value of the project of $11.5 million upon completion. We worked with assessors to get to that number. It yields about $1.23 million in gross TIF, so that's not a present value number, but the present value number is about $685,000 PV today. TIF agreement's $310,000, again 10% for city administrative costs. Quick overview of the redevelopment agreement. Conforms with prior action and representations to the EDA. Requires construction start by May 1 of 25 and finish by December 31 of 2026. We've gone over the TIF amount. It says in there that the project meets the but-for test. There is a look back in this project. It's the flavor of look back that looks back at the construction cost. So if the developer is able to build it a lot cheaper than they're currently representing, the TIF note would get reduced by 50% of that amount. So we only do 50% because it still incents them to actually try to save money on the project. If you take every dollar off the savings, then they have no interest in saving any money. They can just, not that this developer would or any developer would, they could just waste it. But we try to align things with everybody's interests in mind. So, and the affordable housing covenants would be in place for 26 years, the life of the district. And with that, the recommendations for the EDA are in the packet and summarized here. The resolution approving the TIF plan, and then it would be signed if and after the city council later tonight approves and does what they need to do. Again, all these EDA items are contingent on the city council doing what they would theoretically do later tonight. But the second bullet there is to approve the private development agreement, also known and referred to sometimes as the TIF agreement. And then there's a resolution for an interfund loan so that you can pay yourself back for administrative costs. And then later on the city council would consider a resolution adopting the TIF plan. So the EDA kind of gives the money out, and the city council kind of sets the money up so that the EDA can give it out. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions anyone has.
Does anyone have any questions for Shane or staff? Thank you.
Thank you.
We have 3 motions in front of us. Would anyone like to make a motion for A? Oh, okay. No, it's okay. Okay.
Motion to approve the resolution adopting modification of the Development District Program for Development District Number 1 and the tax increment financing plan for tax increment financing district number 1-18.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any other questions? Hearing none. All those in favor, signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, motion passes.
I move to approve the contract for private development with Gladstone Village 2 Limited Partnership.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for the motion to approve the contract for private development with Gladstone Village 2 Limited Partnership. Do we have any further questions? With that, all those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. And we have one more motion.
I move to approve the resolution authorizing an interfund loan for advance of certain costs in connection with tax increment financing district number 1-18.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further questions on this motion? Then none. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Okay, thank you. We'll move on to our next. That is Danette also. Ms. Parr.
Thank you, Acting President and Commissioners. I've been looking forward to this one. I'm not going to lie to you, I've been excited about this item. This site at 1946 English Street, you all know it well. It's the former Moose Lodge site. I think you're all well aware of the condition of the structure. I wasn't going to belabor it by putting photos up, but you could see them in your packet, and you've been by the site, I know a lot. Tonight, we're asking you to adopt a resolution to approve for the demolition of the structurally substandard building and the inclusion of the parcel into a future redevelopment tax increment district. This is only the first step, though, I want to mention. There's a number of things that have to happen sequentially over time, and this is in no way encompassing all of those, but in the future, we'll be coming back to the EDA to bring a contract for the demo of the work. We are right now in the process. We've got a number of quotes that have come back. We're just taking a look at it a little bit closer. And we also have to take a look at the costs associated with abatement of a number of things in the interior of the building, asbestos, lead potentially, things like that, because of the age of the building. We obviously need to be thoughtful about that. That's a requirement. And so there's additional costs associated with that. So we're fleshing that out, but we plan to bring that back to the EDA in the future. We also will be looking at an interfund loan associated with that as well, as we often do in cases like this. Since the last time, which I believe was approximately 2020, I believe was the last time we had, LHB went out and evaluated the building. We have had them go out and reevaluate the building. It has not gotten better since then, not shockingly. So we're not surprised that it is considered a substandard building. And with that, we have 3 years, provided this is, this evening, the resolution is approved. There's some other things we have to do to meet that requirement. But once demo takes place, we have 3 years to establish that TIF district in order to be able to utilize potential TIF designation in the future for redevelopment on the site. One of the reasons we've held off so long is because we wanted to be able to have the redevelopment take place in a way that, and we've talked about this with the EDA before, developers come in, they see something is different in this corridor. Besides the city making an investment of the 14+ million that we did for the infrastructure, the road, and all the other things that makes that area so nice now, we also wanted them to see the development and the investments that were being made on a private side, right? And you can clearly see that. So by the time this comes to fruition for developers to come through and we talk about that process, as we move forward in the coming year, people will be able to understand that, and they're more apt to invest in a way that we would want them to. So we're looking forward to that. This is just the first step in that. So with that, we would ask for the EDA to approve the resolution for demolition of that structurally substandard building that is within your packet.
Thank
And
you.
with that, I can take any questions you may have.
Any questions? I know we're all excited to get that down, too. The bus tour was great, taking us by and just reiterating, going by that, seeing how that really needs to come down. So this is a great step. Okay, with that, do we have a motion in front of us?
I happily motion to approve the resolution regarding the demolition of the structurally substandard building at 1946 English Street and inclusion of the parcel in a future redevelopment tax increment financing district.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further questions? With that, all those in favor signal by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? The motion passes. And with that, we are done with our Maplewood Economic Development Authority special meeting, and we will adjourn.
All right, good evening, everyone. It is 7 o'clock, and I call this city council meeting here to order. Tuesday, November 12th, 2024, Maplewood City Council meeting. Thanks to our council member for coming tonight, our staff, City Manager Sable, and the folks who are here in the room with us tonight, and everyone at home watching us. Welcome to our city council meeting. We'll start off really quick here with the opening statement for our community here. Super excited. Usually the mayor does this, and you just kind of sit back and listen in on this piece of it. But I wanted to just take a quick second to thank all of our residents here in the city of Maplewood, state of Minnesota. Last week, we had an amazing election here in our country. We had a lot of people that voted, but I think what's important is the folks who voted here in the city of Maplewood. We had a great turnout here in the city of Maplewood. 83% of registered voters voted this past week, compared to the state of Minnesota at 76%. So power to the folks here in the city of Maplewood. 20,935 ballots were cast, but what makes it really cool is 43% of those votes, they voted before the election. So we had over 5,500 ballots cast early. A big shout out to our team, our city clerk's Ms. Sint's team. They were here on the weekdays and weekends making that magic happen. So if you were not here, there was line, there was people, there was lots of great questions. And City Manager Sable also shared with us at the one of the day, there was a Maplewood chant outside as people were waiting to get into the city of Maplewood. So what a great operation and grid system we have here. But thank you for voting. I think that's a big piece of it, is that know that your voice matters and you made it count. Really quick, before I move on, I also want to take a quick second to thank all of the staff and folks who took part in making all of the magic happen. I won't be saying any last name. I'm really bad with last names, so I'll be calling out the departments and people's first name. But thank you to the folks from the IT department, Alex, Nick, Mike, and Michael, our building staff, David and Scott, our ballot board, Jerry, Sherry, Steve, Roseanne, and Ken, our city hall staff, Lois, Jen, Reagan, City Clerk Division, Ajla, Christine, Michelle, Pam, and from Public Works, Dave, Jeff, Joe, Don, and Boone. And then we have here just city staff in general, Gary, Matt, Stephanie, David, and Mike. Thank you all so very much from the bottom of my heart and from the council, on behalf of the council and all of our residents in the city of Maplewood. I do also want to take a quick moment to thank all of our election judges who participated this last election cycle. We had over 160 judges that participated. You made magic work in our community in all 13 precincts. We are always looking for new judges, and we want the old judges to also come back too, to continue participating. So if you want to be a part of this process, do reach out to our wonderful city clerk. And lastly, our city clerk, Ms. Sint, you are truly amazing. I was here one of the day, and you were out there helping people fill out paperwork, pointing people where they needed to go. You really put your heart into this. And I say a lot is, it's not hard work. This work is hard work, and you really, truly do the hard work well here at the city of Maplewood. So thank you for that. We'll kick it off really quick here now with the roll call. Ms. Sint, can you do the roll call? Oh. Yes, we can do that first. Sorry about that. So we're going to kick it off with the Pledge of Allegiance, and we have a student here tonight. I'm going to have Charlie Christensen, if you can come up to the podium here and lead us off with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Yeah.
Thank you, Charlie.
No problem.
Charlie is a student from a local school here, learning and observing what local government is tonight. So thank you for being here, Charlie. If you have any questions, we have great staff here that can answer some of those questions for you. So we'll move on to roll call. City Clerk Sint.
Councilmember Villavicencio.
Here.
Councilmember Cave.
Here.
Councilmember Juniman.
Here.
Acting Mayor Lee.
Present.
And Mayor Abrams won't be with us tonight.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Looking for an action item?
So moved?
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilmember Cave and seconded by Councilmember Juniman. Any further discussions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Abstention? Motion passed. Thank you. Next item is the approval of minutes, starting with October 28th, 2024, City Council Workshop meeting minutes.
I move approval.
Second.
Motion be made by Councilmember Juniman, seconded by Councilmember Cave. Any further discussions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Abstention? Motion pass. Next item, October 28th, City Council meeting minutes.
I move approval.
Second.
Motion made by Councilmember Juniman, seconded by Councilmember Cave. Any further discussions? All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Abstention? Thank you. Motion pass. Moving along quickly here to next item on the agenda, appointments and presentation, starting with administrative presentation. City Manager Sable.
Thank you, Acting Mayor and members of the City Council. This is the wonderful quiet period post-election and in advance of the budget. So I just wanted to forecast that we only have 2 City Council meetings remaining for the rest of this calendar year. The second meeting in November, then the first meeting in December. We run into a holiday schedule. So expect the December 9th meeting to be full of agenda items that we want to make sure that we close out. I did also want to forecast a couple of things. The next workshop meeting is going to be the Public Safety Department budget presentation, and Public Safety Director Beardman will be leading that. I anticipate that it'll be a little bit longer than what you have seen, just because it is a more sizable budget and intends to draw a lot more interest. In addition, we also have folks from Ramsey County coming from. They are proposing to have turning on Economic Development Authority provisions at state law, and they're going to give us an update on their strategy for getting that. And then they're also going to get a presentation from their housing staff about how they are intending to use their local affordable housing aid dollars. And so, and what kind of investments that we can anticipate in the city of Maplewood. And one of the things that I'll encourage you to think about maybe in advance is we have a small pot of local affordable housing aid. They have a slightly larger pot. Is there a way to work in partnership to sort of take advantage and leverage both sources differently? So as you start to think about housing options, I want you to start to think about the spirit of partnership with our friends from Ramsey County. And we are going to have Commissioner Reinhardt is going to be here to present that along with Ramsey County staff. Forecast on the December 9th meeting, we will be talking about the adoption of the 2025 levy. This budget process, as we shared last week, has been going on for months, and so this is the culmination of that, and so we will have that hearing. One item that is not on here that I at least want to put on your radar is that we are going to be talking about a legislative platform at our next meeting, and one of the things that we're trying to schedule is a meeting with our legislative delegation. We're trying to find the dates that work best for everybody, and as people's lives are complicated and you add in holidays, it's going to be a little bit tricky to find it, but we hope to find time in early December to have a legislative breakfast where we can share the priorities with our legislative delegation, but also then hear the things that they need help and support from the city of Maplewood on. And so, and then I'll just placeholder for a big fun event is the Santa Parade. It will be December 21st from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. It is a citywide event. When we get the map figured out, we will be sharing that broadly, both with you and then on social media with all of the residents. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Questions, Council? Just a quick one, City Manager Sable. I know cannabis has been a huge piece in the last few months here. We talked a little bit about that, but I don't know if we have any further updates on where we are with cannabis. I know that's the timeline is coming up really fast here.
Thank you, Acting Mayor, for the question, and City Council members. So we are going to have a draft ordinance discussion at our next meeting. We think we've done a poll of the other cities in Ramsey County to see what they're doing and kind of how we align with that. And I know that City Attorney Beatty and Mike Darrow and Andrew Sint have worked on several rounds of drafts, and so we think we're going to have an answer for you in 2 weeks.
Awesome. Thank you much. All right. Moving on to nothing for council presentation. Third item on here is the resolution approving commissioner appointments. Back to you, City Manager Sable.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor and council members. On last meeting on October 20th, the City Council interviewed candidates for the commission openings, and after the vote total and tallies were made, we are recommending the approval of Wes Saunders Pierce and Joanne Cryer for the ENR, our Environmental and Natural Resources Commission, Planning Commissioner Scott Wolschlager, and then for the Heritage Preservation Commissioner, Christy Reese. One of the things that I wanted to note, there was one gentleman who was not able to interview because of an illness in his family. And when we reached out to him, he actually had said, well, I'd also like to serve on the Parks Commission. And it just so happens that we have an opening in the Parks Commission coming up. And so he is going to reapply and re-interview for that spot, which was, I think, his original hope. So I think all things considered, a good end. And we want to make sure that We're not punishing anybody that couldn't make the interview, so we fully intend to have him engaged in our boards and commissions, just in a slightly different way than what we had originally hoped. But these are really wonderful opportunities for our residents to come in and give their time and their talent to the community, and we're grateful for everything that they do.
Any questions? Otherwise, I'm looking for a motion.
I move to approve the attached resolution as indicated by the city manager to appoint the candidates to the commissions as indicated.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilmember Juniman, seconded by Councilmember Vincent Seal. Any further discussions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Abstention? Motion passed. Thank you to all of the residents and constituents of our city who wants to serve and everyone who interviewed. It was a hard decision, definitely, for the council to make. We hope that you will reapply again, and we'll love to have you as a part of one of our commissions in the coming years here. So congratulations to our commissioners and our staff and team. We'll be reaching out to you, and we look forward to having you serve our residents here. So thank you. All right. Moving on to consent agenda. Looking for a motion from council.
Motion consent agenda items G1 through 4.
Second.
All right. Motion's been made by Councilmember Cave and seconded by Councilmember Juniman. Just really quick, wanted to see if we can do a highlight on number 2. All right. All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Abstention? Motion pass. Thank you. Do number 2.
Yeah. Good evening, Acting Mayor and Council. Just an update on this. Beginning in 2025, we've adjusted the wages for temporary, seasonal, and casual employees to $15 per hour. There is one exception, that being the background investigations, which starts at a higher rate. We will look at, our proposal is to look at the max end of that as we get into the 2026 budget and wages for next year.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Moving on to next item here, and the next item is our public hearing. And public hearing here, we have public hearing for the tax increment financing district number 1-18. We'll kick it off here to our presenter, Ms. Parr.
Thank you, Acting Mayor, members of the City Council. This item, if we draw your attention to the overhead, just for a reference for anyone that wasn't tuning into the EDA meeting earlier this evening. In any case, the site is one that we talked about earlier. This is taking 19 manufactured homes and redeveloping those to 56 new apartment units as part of this tax increment financing district 1-18. The last meeting, you opened the public hearing and then you continued it to this meeting. We are asking you this evening to reopen the public hearing, take any testimony that may come before you, and then consider the resolution approving modification of the Development District Program for Development District Number 1 and the Tax Increment Financing Plan for the Tax Increment Financing District Number 1-18. We have our consultant with Ellers continues with us here, and if you have any questions, he can help answer those as well as our city attorney. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Acting Mayor.
Awesome. Thank you, Ms. Parr. And with that being said, I'm going to reopen and hold the public hearing initially scheduled for October 28th, in which the City Council continue to today's date, November 12th, 2024. So with that being said, public hearing is now reopened. Ms. Sint, do we have anyone who has signed up for the public hearing? And if you have not signed up yet, we have a form in the back there. We can put your name on. We call you up here. All right, so we have no one on the list that's signed up. I'm going to ask 2 more times if you are here for the public hearing in regarding to the tax increment financing district number 1-18. Please come on up. And last call, if you are here for the public hearing, tax increment financing plan for financial district number 1-18. Please come on up to the podium. All right. And with that, I'm going to close the public hearing. And council, any questions for staff? Otherwise, looking for a motion.
I move to approve the resolution approving the modification of the Development District Program for Development District Number 1 and the Tax Increment Financing Plan for Tax Increment Financing District 1-18.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilmember Juniman and seconded by Councilmember Villavicen Seal. Any further discussions from council? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Abstention? Motion pass. Thank you, council. Moving on to the next item of the agenda, new business, which is the resolution canvassing the municipal results of the November 5th, 2024 general election. I'll hand that over to our city clerk, Andrew Sint.
Thank you, Acting Mayor and Council. So tonight you are serving as the canvassing board to canvass the municipal results of the November 5th, 2024 general election. As I had said during the primary, every election has its own challenge. The primary was very slow, and we had eyes towards the general, and we were not disappointed. In fact, on the first day of absentee voting, we expected 5 to 20 voters to come in. We had 102, and we said, "Oh boy, this is going to be a little bit different." And we continue to have a challenge with keeping up with the supply of ballots. Ramsey County issues us ballots, and we ended up having consistently, and at the end, 90% of Maplewood voters who voted in person early voted here at City Hall. 10% went to the other sites within Ramsey County. And because of that, we had to keep having Ramsey County issue us more ballots. So we had paper ballots that we had to keep getting more of. We had to make sure we had enough paper applications. Every application needed 2 or 3 labels on it, and so our Dymo labels were in high demand, and we found out differences about Dymo labels, that some of them didn't work, and some of them, we just had some challenges with that. We also had a City Hall power outage one afternoon, and we had enough power in our PCs and our ballot counter that we were able to keep voting in the dark. The next day, the lobby water fountain decided to let go, and we had a flood. So we had a lot of fun with these challenges that were coming in our direction. I will say our largest day was on Monday the 4th, when we had 712 voters that came in on that day. We also redirected hundreds of non-Maplewood residents. And they usually were not, they were like, "Oh, really? I just live over there. I just live up the hill." They could have been, we directed them to either other sites within Ramsey County or Washington County, because Oakdale borders us. So we had that happening. We did have additional hours. It added up to about 15 and a half additional early voting time that the legislature decided we needed in the 2023 legislation. And so that was only for the general elections, and people used it all very well. Each of those weekend days, we had over 300 people that came in. And a lot of times it was families, people coming in with their first-time voters, people taking pictures. I saw that a lot out in the lobby by the flag, with that wall sculpture, or out by the sign that said "Vote Here." So we had a lot of that happening with families coming in, either, like I said, with the first-time voters, or people coming in with their kids and kind of explaining to them what they were doing and why it was important what they were doing. So that was all very fun to see. With the absentee voting, people were very engaged. Why do I have to do this? What is this for? We did a lot of explaining about the whole election system and the election process, which is great. People need to learn about how we do things and how elections run. So it turned out that early voting accounted for about 43% of the Maplewood votes here. When it came to Election Day, some of our challenges, we found out that paper clips and I voted stickers were part of, were something that we had a hard time keeping. We didn't supply enough of because we had a lot of voters. We had about 12,000 voters in, so overall, and some of the numbers that I had given were before this abstract came out, that you are going to be looking at tonight. So there was about 85% turnout for us here in Maplewood. One thing our election judges had to deal with on Election Day was not only did we have challengers from all parties in the various locations, but we also had visits in Precinct 1, 2, 3, and 5 by the Department of Justice. And we had been told this was going to be happening, and they were there because Ramsey County has risen to the level of, in 2020, the census rose Maplewood and Ramsey County as a whole to a certain level where the federal Voting Rights Act, Chapter 203, kicked in, and that has to do with the Hmong population and the interpretive services and different pieces of equipment, materials that we need to have available. And so they were there. There were 3 of them that went through, 2 from the Department of Justice with an interpreter that was reading the materials that we had and just checking on how all of our head judges were interviewed by them. How are you doing this? So we'll see what we have at the end. I haven't heard anything. We didn't, so we'll see how we did. And that all of that is done in conjunction with Ramsey County. So that will be interesting to see what they have to say. One other thing that I just wanted to go with, Acting Mayor Lee had already given many thanks to different people, and I want to echo those thanks. I also want to thank Ramsey County because they are always so gracious with their help amid the chaos of the day, especially. They're very supportive with everything and helping us just kind of work through and make sure that what we are doing matches what they're doing. As we said, you know, the IT staff, the Public Works staff, there were so many people that helped out. Public Works, they had a challenge of rain. On the day I got here at 7 o'clock in the morning to see what they were going to do to get all of our equipment out to the precincts, and because they usually use a flatbed, and they had already determined and gotten the Parks van, and they were ready to get everything there safe because their computers and electronics that they're bringing, they can't get wet. So they had already made that shift for us. So everybody was at top of their game, making sure everything was safe. Also, PD also worked with us to get information about where all the precincts were, who the head judges were. They gave us information of how we needed to handle any situation that may happen at the precinct, which gave the head judges a lot of confidence that they were going to be supported if there was any issues. And they also helped us get our election results down to Ramsey County safe and sound at the end of the night. Those judges that we had, the 160 judges that Acting Mayor Lee talked about, they sit through a very long day. And the ones that we saw at the end of the day were all in good spirits. They are dedicated, they are knowledgeable and resistant. And because, we don't know if it was because there were so many people that voted prior, but they were all back here by 10:15 with all of their equipment and the polling places taken down because they didn't have the lines at the end of the night. So for that, it was a very well-controlled election. I will say that we did have a lot of city staff that was not election staff that helped us out just to even cover the front desk so that we could concentrate. And then we just had people throughout the day just stopping and saying, how are you doing? You're doing a great job. We see what you're doing. We see the volumes. And that in itself was very, very heard by my group and appreciated. We even still have a poster on our wall that thanked us, that showed up in the middle of I think it was election day, it showed up, and people were like, hey, there's a poster out there thanking us. So all of that was seen and heard. And then my staff. Between Christine working with the precincts and the judges, and she headed up what we would call Command Central on Election Day. She had a cell phone that she was answering continually to just to give them answers. And Isla, who she handles the in-person voting, early voting, she set it up twice, once in the hallway, once in here. And for both of them, organization is paramount, and they keep everything just so exact, and they get the judges exactly what they need. And they are big reasons why Ramsey County does not request us to stop doing elections, and why they have no concern with us doing elections. Michelle, she greeted thousands of voters with, "Hi, are you here to vote? Do you live in Maplewood?" And so she said it again and again and again with the same sweetness. And Pam, that was her first chance to get into elections, and she loved it. Everything from moving equipment to helping voters to counting AB ballots, everything. It was just a great time for her. And so, at looking back, we did not just survive the election; we thrived during that election. And I was very impressed and very grateful for them. So back to what we're here for. You are going to canvass the results. So on Election Day at 7 a.m., we had 24,905 people registered. On Election Day, 2,117 people registered, and I will say that is a very high number. We had felt that during AB voting also, that there was just a lot of people, a lot of first time, a lot of movement, families coming in together that had to register. The accepted regular military and overseas absentee ballots and mail ballots equaled 9,105. There were 38 federal office-only absentee ballots, 1 presidential absentee ballot, for a total of 21,186 people voting. The results for the municipal: Rebecca Cave, 7,685, Nikki Villavicencio, 7,618, Alex Klein, 4,712, Stephen Fitz, 5,212, and write-ins were 222. So based on the abstract of votes, the prevailing candidates are Rebecca Cave and Nikki Villavicencio. So with that, I ask that we have a motion to approve the resolution canvassing the municipal results of the November 5, 2024 general election.
Thank you.
Move to approve the resolution canvassing the municipal results of the November 5th, 2024 state general election.
Second.
Motion was made by Councilmember Juniman, seconded by Councilmember Cave. Motion to approve the resolution canvassing the municipal results of the November 5th, 2024 state general election. Any further discussions? City Manager Sabo?
Thank you, Acting Mayor and council members. Andrea did a wonderful job. City Clerk Sint did a wonderful job sort of summarizing that. I think there's maybe two or three things that I think I'd like to add, and one is the level of confidence the public can have in the election process. Elections are complicated things, right? There's tens of thousands of pieces of paper that have to get managed and moved and delivered, and I have all of the confidence in the world that the system put in place by the city clerk works. I think one of the things that I appreciated most was it was quiet and it was calm and there was care behind each of those votes that were taking place, particularly in this building. One of the things that I noticed, and I have a tendency to walk through the building, is there was a culture within the team that was genuinely supportive of one another. So if they knew what they liked certain food, they'd bring it in for each other. They would take breaks together, and they would organize this. And there was a spirit of joy. They had this, like, when you talk about Michelle just greeting everybody, we had people from Wisconsin trying to vote in City Hall. True story. They came from Wisconsin. They were just in the neighborhood and thought they could vote in the Wisconsin election in the city of Maplewood. So, but they greeted those folks with this tremendous spirit of service. And so And that is a direct reflection of your professionalism and your work in this community. So thank you.
Thank you, City Manager. Hopefully you convinced them to move to Maplewood so they can vote here in the future here. We're so used to just going into the booth and just voting, and there's so many moving pieces that makes it happen. We're in and out of there, but thank you again, City Clerk. All right, motion was made and seconded. With no further discussions, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Abstention? Motion pass. Thank you so much, Council. What an exciting year, and congratulations to Councilmember Cave and Councilmember Villavicencio. Look forward to working with the both of you for the next years here to come. So, all right, no further items on our agenda, and with that being said, our City Council meeting for November 12th, 2024 is now adjourned. Thank you.